Would you stay calm if your husband left you over text? What if he didn't just walk away but emptied your bank account, mocked your age, and vanished with a woman half your age? Would you break down or build back stronger? This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about quiet resilience, careful preparation, and a comeback no one saw coming. Emily Rhodes didn't scream. She didn't chase. She simply documented everything, then waited for the perfect moment. What happens when the man who tried to erase you ends up losing everything? Stay with us, because this isn't revenge. This is restoration. It was a Thursday in January, the kind of Vermont winter day where the wind cuts through even the thickest wool and the sky never really wakes up. Inside Maple and Grain, my little handcrafted woodshop nestled in Middlebury's quiet Main Street, the cedar-scented air was warm, inviting, full of the low hum of the space heater and soft classic rock. Mrs. Langston was deciding between two hand-carved jewelry boxes for her granddaughter when my phone buzzed on the counter beside the register. I glanced down. I'm done. I've moved to Lake Tahoe with Kayla. Don't try to reach me. Also, I emptied our joint account. Enjoy the cabin life, babe. No salutation. No explanation. Just that. I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary. My eyes didn't widen. My breath didn't catch. Only a quiet stiffness settled in my chest, like the moment right before ice forms on a pond. My voice didn't change as I complimented Mrs. Langston's choice. I wrapped the box in craft paper, tied it with burgundy twine, and thanked her for supporting local. The doorbell jingled softly as she left. Then, and only then, I picked up my phone and read the message again. Lake Tahoe, with Kayla. 24-year-old Kayla from his office, the girl I had smiled politely at during the Christmas party last month, when she'd laughed a little too loudly at Mark's old stories. I'd noticed the way she hovered, the glances that lasted a beat too long. I just never thought he'd actually... No, I corrected myself. I did think it. I just didn't think he'd do it like this. I locked up the shop early. The snow had started to fall harder, blanketing the sidewalk in silence. Inside my truck, the heat blasting, I finally let out a single breath. It wasn't a gasp or a cry. Just the slow exhale of someone who already knew this moment was coming. Mark had sent a text message as if he were canceling a gym membership, not ending a 12-year marriage. And with that final, ha-ha, the kind that makes your stomach turn, he must have pictured me falling apart, weeping on the floor, broken and helpless. He didn't know I had opened my own account months ago. He didn't know I had copies of our financial records tucked away. And he sure as hell didn't know I'd been preparing for the day he made this move. Because Mark may have walked out on me, but he was about to find out I was never the one being left behind. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen of our cabin and stared at the coffee pot as it gurgled to life. The snow outside had thickened overnight, turning the pine trees behind the house into stoic white statues. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there in my robe, holding a mug, and thought, so this is how it ends. But the truth was, it didn't start with that message. It started months ago. Maybe even years. Mark used to be funny. Not in the stand-up comedy kind of way, but in the dry, charming way that made people lean in at dinner parties. He was confident, ambitious. We met in Chicago, back when I was still designing interiors for overpriced high-rises and he worked in corporate logistics. He convinced me to leave the city, to move somewhere quiet. He said he'd always dreamed of Vermont, fresh air, small towns, a chance to slow down. I didn't argue. I wanted a change too. I opened Maple and Grain 6 months later. What started as a passion project, woodworking, refinishing antique furniture, selling local artisan goods, became something real, something mine. He always referred to it as your little hobby, even after the books started showing higher numbers than his paycheck. I let it go, just like I let a lot of things go. Like the long nights he started pulling at the office, the sudden gym obsession, the colognes I didn't recognize, the text messages he wouldn't let me glimpse. The way his voice flattened when we talked, if we talked. One night, about 4 months ago, I found a receipt for a wine tasting and dinner, at Blueberry Hill Inn, a fancy place out in Goshen. It had been on a Thursday, the same night he'd claimed to be stuck late reviewing payroll. I didn't confront him. Instead, I quietly started moving my personal savings to a separate account at a credit union in town, just in case. He noticed nothing, or maybe he didn't care to ask. I had offered marriage counseling back in October. I remember the exact moment we were sitting on the porch, watching the leaves fall. I said, "I think we're losing something, and I want to fight for it." He sipped his beer and muttered something about how I was always so dramatic. That night, I realized I was fighting for something he'd already given up on. Then came Kayla. At the office Christmas party, I watched her laugh at everything he said, brush imaginary lint off his blazer, lean into him like they shared a secret. I caught him watching her when she wasn't looking. And when he introduced us, his arm didn't wrap around me, it hovered, unsure. She was 24, fresh out of college, working as the event coordinator. The kind of woman who still believed sarcasm made men interesting and attention meant affection. I didn't hate her. Not then. I pitied her. Because I had once believed the same things. Looking back, the signs were written all over our house. The folded laundry he never acknowledged. The dinners that went cold on the table. The way he sighed when I spoke about plans to expand the store, as if success was somehow inconvenient. I had loved Mark. That part is real. I gave up a city, a career, and a whole future I'd pictured in my 20s not because he asked me to, but because I believed in us. I planted roots here, built something. Poured every ounce of my being into a new life, into a cabin nestled on the edge of a town most people forget exists. And while I was carving out hope in maple and pine, he was busy planning his exit. The part that stung wasn't the leaving. It was the way he left. With a text, with mockery. With that line, "Enjoy the cabin life, babe," like I was some old ornament collecting dust on the mantle. But what Mark forgot was this. Cabins are built to last. That night, I sat by the fireplace with our old wedding album. The pages stuck slightly together from years of humidity and handling. There we were, Emily and Mark, Chicago City Hall, two smiles full of future. He looked different now, tighter jeans, smug grin, chasing some idea of youth. I closed the book. Then I opened my laptop and began sorting through files, bank records, business documents, and screenshots. He had made his move. Now it was my turn. 3 days after his text, Mark posted a photo on Instagram. There he was, standing on the deck of a rented chalet in Lake Tahoe, wearing sunglasses too expensive for someone who hadn't paid his half of the mortgage in months. Beside him, Kayla beamed into the camera, one arm wrapped around his waist, the other holding a mimosa. The caption read, "New beginnings, out with the old, in with the fun." I didn't follow him, of course, but people talk in a town like Middlebury, and word travels faster than wildfire when someone's husband runs off with his assistant. That same afternoon, another text came through. "Don't act surprised. You've been boring for years. You have your little wooden shop. Let me have some fun. Little, wooden, shop." It wasn't just a digit, was an erasure. As if the business I built from scratch, the one that paid our bills, that employed 2 full-time artisans, that had customers driving in from across the county, was a joke. The anger didn't hit all at once. It rose slowly, a low burn, the kind that doesn't make you scream, it makes you act. I remembered the night I found the hidden credit card statement. It had been tucked under his desk blotter, barely concealed. Charges from a hotel in Montpelier, 2 tickets to a Broadway show in Albany, a spa in Saratoga Springs. I hadn't said anything then. I just made copies. Quiet, careful. My lawyer's name was Cynthia Geller. We'd met when I was buying the building for Maple and Grain 2 years ago. I remembered how impressed she'd been by my meticulous records and my insistence on keeping the deed in my name. "You've got instincts," she'd said. "Don't ever let anyone tell you that's paranoia." Now, sitting in my office with the fireplace crackling and a pile of papers on my desk, I dialed her number. "It's time," I said. Cynthia didn't ask for backstory. She didn't need to. Do you want me to file for emergency asset protection? Yes, I said. And I want to freeze anything that's joint. I have proof he emptied the account. I'll need everything you've got. She didn't have to wait long. Within an hour, I had scanned and sent credit card statements, photos of text messages, receipts, and copies of our tax returns. I even sent her a screenshot of the Instagram post. The next day, Mark's mother called. Emily, I just spoke to Mark. He's very hurt. He says you're being spiteful, trying to ruin his new life. I paused. Did he tell you he drained our joint account? That he used our credit card to fund a vacation with his girlfriend? A beat of silence. Well, he said things weren't working. That you've been cold lately. Distant. He's not a bad man, Emily. Barbara, I said evenly. He's a grown man who left his wife of 12 years over text, insulted her age and her business, stole her money, and took off with a woman young enough to be his niece. He's not just a bad man, he's a coward. She didn't argue, not directly, but I could hear the disapproval softening in her voice, the crack of doubt forming. That weekend, more texts came in. I know this is hard for you, but Kayla and I are in love. You'll be fine. You've got that shop and your cat. We didn't have a cat. Then, I've told everyone. My family supports me. They agree we just drifted apart. Don't make this harder than it has to be. But he was the only one making things harder. And when the next text read, I used the joint credit card for the flights and the Airbnb. Consider it my parting gift. Lol. I nearly laughed, not out of amusement, out of disbelief. Did he truly think LOL would shield him from fraud allegations? I forwarded every message to Cynthia. Keep them coming, she replied. You're building an ironclad case. In the meantime, I called the credit card company. Their fraud department took a special kind of interest once I explained that the charges had been made by a husband who had already transferred the account balance to a personal card just to make it harder to trace. By the time the next Monday rolled around, Mark and Kayla had arrived at the airport to find their tickets invalid, their Airbnb reservation canceled, their dreams of a ski vacation melted. And yet, even with all of that, he kept texting. Don't worry, I'll let you keep the cabin until you find something smaller. You'll feel safer in a one-bedroom anyway. I looked around the living room, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, reclaimed wood beams, and iron stove I'd restored myself. The home I'd bought before we married, the deed in my maiden name. Keep the cabin? He really thought he had a claim to this place? I didn't respond. Instead, I poured myself a glass of the red wine I'd been saving since our 5th anniversary and raised it slightly toward the ceiling. To your fun, I muttered. And to my fury. Because fury, when it's quiet and focused, can do more damage than rage ever could. The cabin was colder that night, not because the heater broke. It was humming steadily, blowing warm air into every room, but the kind of cold I felt wasn't the kind you fix with a thermostat. It was the kind that settled deep in your bones, where the memories live. Outside, snow clung to the windows like frostbitten fingerprints. The moonlight made the pines glow silver. I sat on the floor in flannel pajamas, back against the couch, wedding album on my lap. It hadn't been opened in years. The edges of the pages were soft from time, the photos still glossy. There we were, Mark and I on the courthouse steps in Chicago, just married and laughing like we'd figured life out. His tie was crooked, my hair had come undone from the wind. We looked so young. So sure. I traced a fingertip over our smiling faces and whispered, "Where did you go?" I knew the answer. He'd been slipping away slowly, late meetings, gym selfies, new clothes, less talking, more silence. I'd watched it happen and still hoped love would pull us back to center. That was my mistake. The next page was a photo of us building the cabin, me holding up a paintbrush, my jeans speckled in white, Mark measuring a beam, squinting at it with pretend seriousness. We were building a dream together. At least I thought we were. I closed the album. My body ached not from work, but from carrying too much grief for too long. On the table beside me, my phone lit up again. Kayla says she's shocked I lasted with someone so dull for that long. She's got fire, Em. Real fire. You used to have it too, back when you were fun. That one hit differently. It wasn't just cruel, it was calculated. As if he needed to validate his betrayal by making sure I believed I deserved it. My hands trembled. Not from rage, from shame. Because part of me believed it. Maybe I had stopped being fun. Maybe the Emily who danced barefoot in the kitchen to Fleetwood Mac had been replaced by someone who paid taxes early, who organized shipping schedules, who worried about product margins. Maybe I was dull. I curled up on the rug, blanket pulled over my knees, and stared into the fireplace. The flames flickered, but I couldn't feel the warmth. This wasn't what I imagined for 41. I thought I'd have a family by now. Maybe not kids, we never could quite agree on the timing, but something rooted. Something stable. I thought Mark and I would grow older together, not grow apart. Instead, I was here. In a house that echoed too loudly. In a silence that felt less like peace and more like punishment. I cried for the first time. Not the loud, dramatic kind. The kind that leaks out slowly, silent tears that stain without sound. I thought about calling someone, my sister in Minnesota, maybe. Or Rachel, the artist friend I'd lost touch with after she moved to Portland. But something about speaking the words aloud my husband left me for a 24-year-old felt too pathetic. So I sat there and let the pain have its time. Sometimes you have to let things break before you start rebuilding. The wind picked up outside. The windows rattled slightly. The fire crackled in the hearth. I wasn't ready to be strong yet. Not tonight. I wasn't preparing case files or making bold declarations. I was just a woman, left alone in the house she'd built with someone who no longer wanted to stay. And for the first time in this whole mess, I let myself feel every inch of it. The betrayal, the insult, the loneliness, the ending. And somewhere in that quiet, I also felt the tiniest spark of something else, not hope, not yet, but maybe a beginning. The morning after my quiet breakdown, I woke up to frost on the windows and a stillness I no longer feared. I brewed my coffee, wrapped myself in a wool shawl, and walked into my office. No makeup. No music. Just a clear head and a legal pad. The first word I wrote at the top, inventory. Not of furniture, of facts. I pulled open the filing cabinet where I'd kept nearly every document since we bought the cabin. Bank statements, loan applications, property deeds, receipts. I stacked them in labeled piles across the floor. Mark always said I was obsessive when it came to paperwork. Turns out, obsession makes great protection. Then came the emails. I searched our joint inbox for any travel confirmations or digital receipts. And there it was, an Expedia itinerary from the shared card, showing 2 round-trip tickets to Reno and a 3-night chalet booking under Mark Harrison plus guest. I took a screenshot and filed it. I dug into the credit card portal and found more. Spa charges, ski rental deposits, restaurant reservations, all made in the last week, all on a card that was supposed to be used for household expenses. Next, I opened my messages. Every text Mark had sent since his departure, the ones dripping with condescension and arrogance, were carefully exported to PDF. The final one in the chain still made me pause. BTW. I used the joint credit card for everything. Consider it a parting gift. LOL. The LOL was going to look great in front of a judge. By midday, I had a folder thicker than my old design portfolios. I sent it all to Cynthia with a single-line email. Ready when you are. She replied 10 minutes later. Emily, this is gold. I'm filing today. Will request a temporary freeze on joint assets and an emergency hearing for financial misconduct. He doesn't stand a chance. Later that day, I logged into my shop's social media page. I hadn't planned to post anything about my personal life, but local gossip had already leaked bits of the story. Middlebury isn't a town where secrets last long. I kept it simple. Life shifts sometimes. People leave, but handmade things, like resilience, are built to last. Maple and Grain is still here and still growing. Thanks for being part of it. By the next morning, the post had over 300 shares and dozens of supportive comments. People stopped by with muffins, hugs, even handmade cards. One woman, a regular named June, came in just to say, "You're not alone. I went through the same thing 5 years ago, and now I'm better than I've ever been." I looked at her and smiled. Maybe that's what's next for me too. Orders tripled that weekend. A travel blogger from Vermont reshared one of our handcrafted cabin stools with the caption, "Supporting this incredible small business today run by one of the fiercest women I've met." The truth was, I was fierce. I just hadn't seen it yet. That Sunday night, I poured myself another glass of wine, not out of sadness this time, but ritual. I opened the boutique's new website backend and stared at the analytics. Our online traffic was up 600%. I had to call 2 part-time helpers to assist with packaging. Mark had thought he was taking everything from me. What he'd actually done was free me from everything holding me back. The next morning, Cynthia called again. Her voice was sharp, energized. "We've got the hearing, Friday at the courthouse in Montpelier, and Emily, this is more than a divorce. We're going to show financial misconduct, documented fraud, and strategic concealment of assets. The court's going to eat this up." She paused, then added, "Do you want him served in Lake Tahoe?" I smiled. No rush. Let him enjoy his little escape a few more days. That evening, I started drafting my expansion proposal: new shelving for the showroom, a seasonal pop-up in Burlington, and a potential holiday gift guide partnership with a New England artisan collective. For the first time in months, I wasn't just reacting, I was building again. It wasn't revenge that drove me, it was clarity. The version of me Mark had belittled, the dull, tired, boring version was a projection. He wanted me to feel small so he wouldn't have to feel guilty. But guilt doesn't belong to me, growth does. I looked around the office, past the wood-grain shelves and leather-bound sketchbooks, and saw a future Mark couldn't imagine because he never bothered to ask what I really wanted. He used to call me a dreamer. Said it like an insult. Now? That's exactly what was going to save me. The morning of the hearing, I wore black slacks, a slate blue blazer, and the same boots I'd worn to sign the deed for Maple and Grain. Nothing flashy, just the kind of outfit a woman wears when she knows who she is. The courthouse in Montpelier was plain brick with little ceremony. Snow clung to the steps. The cold bit at my face as I walked inside. Mark was already in the hallway when I arrived. He looked different, not younger, not cooler, just smaller. He wore a too-tight blazer and some trendy pattern that made him look like he was trying out for a boy band reunion tour. His hair was gelled into a style more suited for someone 10 years younger. Kayla stood next to him in a beige trench coat, nervously checking her phone. She didn't look at me, I didn't look away. We were called into the hearing room by a bailiff who couldn't have cared less about the tabloid-worthy drama unraveling behind these doors. Inside, Cynthia set down her briefcase and pulled out our file, the one I had helped build for weeks. Mark's lawyer looked like he'd been hired last minute. A little flustered, carrying a portfolio that was far too thin. The judge was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a calm voice. I liked her immediately. "Mrs. Rhodes," she said. "You may begin." Cynthia rose and delivered everything with surgical precision. Bank statements, screenshots of texts, credit card receipts, property records showing the cabin deed in my name. Business documents proving Maple and Grain had always been solely mine illegally, financially and operationally. Then came the texts. The one where he said, "Enjoy the cabin life, babe." The one that read, "Use the joint card for everything. LOL. The judge squinted slightly at the LOL and said dryly, "I assume this wasn't meant as a joke?" Mark's lawyer cleared his throat. "My client admits some unfortunate word choices, Your Honor, but wishes to emphasize that the business, while legally separate, was part of the marital ecosystem. He offered emotional support during its early years." Cynthia didn't flinch. "Support, Your Honor, like calling it a little wooden shop, mocking its existence, and trying to claim half of it after emptying their joint account?" She slid a printout of his messages across the bench. The judge looked at Mark. "Do you deny authoring these?" He looked down, then mumbled, "Number Mr. Harrison," she said, voice firm. "This court finds sufficient evidence of financial misconduct, including unauthorized use of joint assets and attempted post-separation exploitation of your spouse's business. As such, all joint accounts are frozen, and you are ordered to return the withdrawn funds within 30 days. Mark blinked. "But those funds were..." The judge raised a hand. "Then I suggest you find a way to repay them." I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Outside the courtroom, I watched as Kayla argued with him in hushed tones. Her voice cracked. She pointed toward me, then toward the exit. He waved his hands like a teenager, explaining away a bad grade. Then she walked fast heels, red cheeks, straight out the door. She didn't wait for him. Mark stood there, alone, with nothing but the falling snow catching in his overstyled hair. As I walked past, he hissed under his breath, "You've destroyed me." I stopped. Looked him square in the eyes. "No, Mark, you destroyed yourself. I just made sure I didn't go down with you." His mother was waiting at the bottom of the steps. Barbara. Wearing a wool coat, hands stuffed in leather gloves, expression unreadable. She said nothing when he approached, just opened the passenger door of her car and let him climb in. The same man who once mocked my age and independence was now being driven home by his mother at 45. Irony, as it turns out, has excellent timing. Back at the cabin, I sat by the fire with a fresh cup of tea. The hearing was over, but the victory wasn't loud. It didn't come with champagne or confetti. It was quiet, firm, permanent. Cynthia called that evening. "Congratulations," she said. "That was airtight. He'll never touch your business. Ever." "Thank you," I said, "for everything." "No, Emily," she replied. "You did that all on your own. I just translated the paperwork." The next week, Maple and Grain was featured in Vermont Makers Monthly as a resilient woman-owned business redefining small-town retail. I hung the article on the wall of my office, right above my framed business license, and beside that, a copy of Mark's text, "Enjoy the cabin life, babe." I read it every so often not to remember the pain, but to remember the point where I stopped allowing someone else to write my ending. 6 months after the hearing, I opened the doors to Maple and Grain, Burlington. It was a crisp summer morning, sun glinting off Lake Champlain, and the line wrapped halfway around the block. A reporter from the Burlington Herald asked if I wanted to talk about the divorce, the courtroom victory, the scandal that empowered a brand. I shook my head gently. "That's not the story," I said. "The story is about building something that lasts." Inside the shop, beneath vaulted ceilings and rows of hanging Edison bulbs, was the framed message. The one Mark had sent to start it all. "Enjoy the cabin life, babe." Beneath it, a brass plaque. "Success is the best reply." Mark hadn't returned the money. Last I heard, his wages were being garnished by court order. Kayla moved back to Ohio, enrolled in grad school, and according to her blog was working through some serious self-reflection. One of her posts even mentioned falling for a man who needed validation more than love. I didn't comment, didn't repost. I didn't need to. The growth spoke for itself. 3 stores, 29 employees, a waitlist of artisans asking to be featured. My business had become a hub of stories: women leaving marriages, men rebuilding after grief, retirees starting second careers in craft. My shop was no longer just shelves and sawdust. It was restoration. In every sense. I was invited to speak at a women's entrepreneurship panel in Boston that fall. The moderator asked, "What's one piece of advice you'd give to women building a business?" I smiled. "Trust your instincts. And keep records." The room laughed, but they understood. Later that night, as I closed up the original store in Middlebury, I saw a familiar figure standing near the back wall. Barbara. She was holding a carved maple clock, the same one Mark used to hate, called it too folksy. She approached me slowly. "I didn't know what to say for a long time," she said, "but I wanted to thank you." "For what?" "For teaching our family that protecting yourself doesn't make you cruel. It makes you prepared. Her eyes welled, but she didn't cry. I raised him better than that. Or I thought I did. I nodded gently. We all believe what we need till we can't. She bought the clock. Paid full price. Didn't ask for a discount. And as she left, she said, he still talks about the life he could have had, but he doesn't realize he didn't lose it. He threw it away. That night, I sat at my desk beneath warm lamplight, finalizing plans for location number 4. My newest assistant, a woman named Claire, fresh out of a difficult marriage, peeked her head in to say goodnight. You staying late? She asked. Just a bit, I smiled. Some of us have cabins to enjoy. She laughed. Well, enjoy the cabin life, boss. I looked around. The hardwood shelves, the smell of cedar, the quiet hum of a space fully mine. I will, I said, and I meant it.